Tonight, breaking news. Welcome, I'm David Muir. To grasp the scale of Russia's economic crisis, imagine two images taken just a year apart. In late 2024, Moscow's supermarkets appear bright and orderly, yet a man quietly slips butter into his coat, a small sign of anxiety. Fast forward to November 2025 inches, Yakutsk, a region rich in diamonds and gold, where muddy streets, weary faces, and long lines for frozen meat tell a starkly different story. This is a nation under real strain, the village that should have been prosperous. When cameras traveled to the remote village of Isha in the Tyumen region, what appeared was a scene reminiscent of a dystopian future rather than a resource-rich nation. Roads have been broken for years, asphalt long stripped away by harsh winters and lack of maintenance, leaving behind pits and gravel paths that look untouched by progress. Yet amid this neglect, one thing stands tall: a rusty pickup truck outfitted with enormous loudspeakers. This makeshift propaganda vehicle winds through ruined streets, blasting patriotic music at full volume and urging citizens to remain loyal and resilient. It's a symbolic snapshot of modern Russia, where infrastructure decays quietly while political messaging remains loud and uninterrupted. This contrast between deterioration and determination lays bare a deeper truth about where the government chooses to invest its energy: a nation prioritizing war over welfare. The economic imbalance becomes clearer when examining how national resources are distributed. While hospitals struggle with limited supplies and local governments lack funds to repair roads or utilities, defense spending has surged to historic levels. Trillions of rubles have been funneled into military production, salaries for soldiers, and subsidies for arms manufacturers. Civilian sectors, transportation, agriculture, healthcare are starved of support. This tilt towards militarization has created a dual reality: a country that looks powerful from a distance but feels increasingly fragile from within. Everyday Russians sense this shift. Their daily lives have become a constant negotiation with rising prices, unpredictable supplies, and employment instability. The more the state leans into war, the heavier the burden on those trying simply to live. A rare admission from the central bank. In this fragile environment, Elvira Nabiullina, long praised internationally for navigating Russia through previous crises, delivered words that startled analysts and citizens alike. Known for her calm and technical communication style, she admitted that predicting the impact of new Western sanctions had become very difficult. In diplomatic language, this was a warning shot. The system was losing visibility and control. Her announcement that interest rates would remain at 21% until at least the end of 2026 was equally alarming. Such high rates make it nearly impossible for businesses to borrow, invest, or expand. The government is effectively stepping on the economic brake pedal, even as military spending forces the engine to run at maximum output. It is a contradictory strategy, one that strains both households and industries to their breaking point. Return to an economy of barter. The depth of this strain was underscored by a surprising statement from Defense Industry Director Aleksey Chadayev, who revealed that the financial landscape has become so restrictive that some companies are reverting to barter arrangements reminiscent of the tumultuous 1990 seconds. When firms trade equipment for raw materials instead of money, it signals that liquidity has vanished from the system. Credit has dried up, financial channels have weakened, and trust in banking has eroded. This return to primitive exchanges exposes how fragile the structure has become. It also paints a concerning picture of what lies ahead. When an economy moves backwards in its operations, progress becomes nearly impossible, the world cutting Russia off. If all this were merely a currency crisis, Russia could attempt to stabilize itself by selling oil to secure foreign currency. But what is unfolding is not a standard recession. It is a systematic logistical constriction, arguably one of the most comprehensive in modern history. Borders are tightening, trade routes are slowing, and key supply chains are wearing thin. Western sanctions have been expanded not only to financial institutions but also to transportation corridors, insurance companies, and shipping networks. This means even when Russia can produce goods, moving them has become increasingly complicated. The country is not just losing wealth, it is being physically disconnected from global commerce. As the circle of restrictions tightens, the pressure mounts on domestic production and consumer availability. The Polish border becomes an economic firewall. On the western flank, Poland has turned its border into something far more severe than a customs checkpoint. It has become, in effect, an economic firewall. Controls are so strict that, according to sources, not even small cargo can move freely. This blockade impacts more than imported goods. It disrupts the entire agricultural ecosystem inside Russia. Modern Russian agriculture is not built on Soviet-era independence, but on global integration. 70% of key agricultural inputs, seeds, pesticides, machinery parts come from Europe. Without access to these materials, tractors lie broken, harvesters sit idle, and production capacity declines sharply. One region after another reports machinery awaiting parts that may never arrive. Without the technology that sustains large-scale farming, fields remain unplanted and harvests shrink. Kazakhstan's quiet break with Moscow. A quieter but equally significant shift came from Kazakhstan, traditionally one of Moscow's closest partners. Concerned about secondary sanctions, the Kazakh government imposed new restrictions on grain transit, payment processes, and the movement of Russian goods. Trains were delayed, truckloads of essential supplies piled up at border crossings, and long-standing trade routines fell apart. For Russia, which relies heavily on Kazakhstan as a logistical bridge to Asia, this was more than a bureaucratic nuisance. It was a strategic setback. The message was clear. Regional allies are recalibrating in favor of economic survival. For ordinary Russians, the impact is seen in the empty shelves of supermarkets and the sudden disappearance of everyday staples they once took for granted. Shelves empty and prices surge. Among the remaining items on store shelves, butter has become an unlikely symbol of inflation. Official reports indicate a price increase of 25.7% since the beginning of the year, though some regions have experienced hikes closer to 40%. Supermarkets now lock butter inside clear security boxes, treating it like a luxury item. This rise is not limited to butter. According to recent data, nearly 1 in 4 Russians has reduced their food consumption. Milk, once consumed at levels comparable to European countries, has seen a dramatic drop from 249 kilograms per person annually to just 165. Rice sales have fallen by 10%, while potato prices are up 64% nationwide. When staples become unpredictable, available one week, gone the next, families begin rationing and worrying about tomorrow. Such uncertainty erodes confidence and amplifies stress. Labor shortages across the country. A compounding factor behind these shortages is a severe labor deficit. The government mobilized hundreds of thousands of skilled workers, engineers, technicians, drivers, farmers, sending them to the front lines. At the same time, Central Asian migrant workers, who formed a backbone of Russia's agricultural and construction sectors, began leaving the country due to currency devaluation and tightening policies. This dual loss has created a nationwide shortage of over 200,000 agricultural workers alone. Fewer hands mean fewer planted fields, fewer harvested crops, and fewer deliveries reaching stores. Even when grain reserves exist, the logistical manpower needed to distribute them is weakening. Reserves locked away while prices climb. Russia does indeed possess substantial grain reserves built up over years of strong harvests. These reserves are meant for emergencies, droughts, crop disease, or market instability. Yet, according to emerging reports, large portions of these reserves remain locked in warehouses. Some analysts suggest that they may be held for future export deals that could bring in valuable foreign currency. While this may help the state's finances, it leaves domestic markets strained. Bread prices continue to rise, and families find themselves cutting back on even the most basic foods. This creates a difficult dilemma for the Kremlin: protect reserves and profits, or intervene to ease public pressure. The longer this tension persists, the more questions emerge about priorities and leadership. Fuel, transportation, and the heavy cost of distance. Beyond food, transportation is one of the most significant contributors to rising prices. Diesel costs have climbed more than 11% this year, while several refineries have slowed production due to equipment shortages. Without subsidies, farmers struggle to fuel their machinery, and truckers face mounting expenses that are ultimately passed on to consumers. Russia's vast railroad network, essential for moving goods across thousands of kilometers, is deteriorating. Freight volumes have dropped for nearly 2 years. Hundreds of thousands of rail cars sit idle, and routes increasingly prioritize military cargo. This forces more goods onto roads that are themselves in poor condition, increasing delays and costs. Meanwhile, drone strikes and sabotage incidents have disrupted fuel depots and bridges, further slowing distribution. The combined effect is a supply chain under continuous stress. The social pressure beneath the surface. Taken together, these developments illustrate a clear and troubling trajectory. Russia's attempt to sustain its global ambitions has come at the cost of domestic stability. The social pressure is building quietly in long supermarket lines, in reduced meals at family tables, in the struggle to find once ordinary products, and in conversations whispered in workplaces and homes. The fear that once ensured political silence is now competing with a more fundamental force, the instinct to provide for one's family. History reminds us that when shelves empty faster than assurances can be made, public patience wears thin. A nation at a crossroads. This is not the first time Russia has faced economic turmoil, but the conditions today are layered, complex, and deeply intertwined with geopolitical decisions. The country's future will depend on whether leaders choose to adjust course or continue prioritizing military objectives over civilian needs. The current tension between ambition and affordability cannot stretch indefinitely. As the images from supermarkets, mining towns, and rural villages show, the cracks are no longer easy to hide. They are becoming part of daily life. And the question now is not whether Russia can outlast its economic challenges, but how long its citizens are willing to bear the weight of them.